Welcome to the Oklahoma Commission on Marginally Producing Oil and Gas Wells Seminar, Oil and Gas Management from the Beginning. This video presents the basic course on this topic and will take you from land ownership through mineral rights, division order instruments, and revenue check reconciliation. The important information provided has been developed by our program presenters, Tina Bonner, a certified mineral manager, Liz Fajan with the Oklahoma Marginal Well Commission, Joe Anderson from Helmerich and Payne Incorporated, and Elizabeth Nolan from Paradigm Technologies. Meet the wheat crop family. Sam Wheat Crop, homesteader. Lewis Wheat Crop, rancher, farmer. Elizabeth Place, flower child. Petey Place, agricultural engineer. And Sandy Beaches, adventurer. Now, old Sam Wheat Crop had some property in Oklahoma. He had fee ownership to his property. That means old Sam owned the rights to both the surface and the minerals of his property. He can give up or retain those rights in many different ways. He can sell or transfer his rights to either the minerals or the surface or both. As a fee owner, he can convey those rights to anyone he chooses, 'cause he has total ownership of the property. If he wants, he can transfer the surface rights to one person and the mineral rights to another person. But doing so severs the fee ownership. So, old Sam just hangs on to his property. When fee ownership is severed, the surface interest owner can use the surface in any way he wants, but he can't do anything about the minerals that may be below the surface. His rights are only surface rights. Now, on the other hand, the mineral interest owner has no surface rights other than access to the land to explore it for minerals or to develop it for production. He can lease his oil and gas rights to others who will pay him bonuses, rentals, and royalties. Now, old Sam Wheat Crop's property was somewhere in Adair County, Oklahoma. To find out exactly where, we need to use the property's legal mumbo-jumbo, as Sam calls it, based on the United States Rectangular Survey. We'll be looking at township, range, section, and section subdivisions. Phew. Sam's property is legally described as Section 36, Township 18 North, Range 24, East Indian Meridian, Adair County, Oklahoma. Sam, well, he just calls it home. So let's find out exactly where Sam Wheat Crop's property is. Using the rectangular survey, which is really just a big grid system, we see that there are two meridians, or dividing lines, in Oklahoma. One is called the Cimarron Meridian, and it's used in the Panhandle. The other one, the Indian Meridian, is used for the rest of the state. These meridians are starting points for ranges, which run east and west of the meridian lines. Sam's property is somewhere in Range 24 East. Now we have to find the north-south location. Now, going back to the rectangular survey, find the baseline extending from east to west. All townships run north and south from the baseline and are numbered as you count north or south of the baseline. Township 18 North is right here. This information narrows down the location of Sam's property to be in a 6-mile square of the state. To find where in that square his property is, we must use section and subdivision information. Township 18 North, Range 24 East has 36 sections, each usually 1 mile square. Now, we're not really sure who came up with this numbering system, but it seems they couldn't decide whether to go right to left or left to right, so they did both, because numbering of township sections run from right to left, left to right, alternating as one goes from the top to the bottom. Sam's property is section 36, right here. Each section, being a square mile, has 640 acres. And old Sam Wheatcrop's property is a full section, so Sam has, of course, 640 acres of fee ownership. Now, old Sam died, and his son Lewis inherited Sam's property through probate. Originally, Sam had planned to give the west half of Section 36 to Lewis and the east half of the section to his daughter, Elizabeth. But at the time of Sam's death, Elizabeth, flower child that she was, just couldn't be found. So, by instructions in Sam's will, the entire section was conveyed to Lewis.
Yeah, they used to go over to Cordell and Bowl all the time. Well, that's the last time we saw her back in 61.
Now, when Elizabeth finally did turn up, well, she gladly accepted Lewis's kind offer to deed the east half of Section 36 over to her. Now, Elizabeth and Lewis each own 320 acres of land, or what most folks know as a half section. Elizabeth's property is legally described as east half of Section 36, Township 18 North, Range 24 East, Indian Meridian, Adair County, Oklahoma. But the neighbors were mostly concerned it would come to be described as Liz's commune of mysticism and free love. Elizabeth, ever free spirit and having no desire for worldly possessions, decided to give the south half of her property to her son, Petey Place, who for years had worked the land and had come to love it. His property, Petey Place's place, is legally known as the southeast quarter of Section 36, Township 18 North, Range 24 East, Indian Meridian, Adair County, Oklahoma. We can abbreviate it like this. Elizabeth's daughter, Sandy Beaches, ever the adventurous and industrious one, received the north half of Elizabeth's property. So Elizabeth's original 320 acres have now been split into two 160-acre portions. As our saga continues, Petey runs into some financial problems and decides to raise some much-needed cash by conveying the north half of his mineral interest to his sister, Sandy. So Sandy now has mineral ownership of the north half of the southeast quarter of Section 36, in addition to the property she got from her mother. She now has a total of 240 acres of mineral interest and 160 acres of surface interest. Petey, on the other hand, has only 80 acres of mineral interest, but still retains 160 acres of surface interest, which makes him perfectly happy. Now, all this talk about southeast quarters and acreage and such is very important in Oklahoma property matters. The accuracy of the legal description is significant when it comes to developing the surface or mineral estates of the property. Inaccuracies can lead to confusion, lawsuits, family feuds, and serious squabbles. The way the property is conveyed is also important. Originally, land in Oklahoma was granted to persons by treaty or land runs. Probates and final decrees are used to pass on title to the land when a person dies. That's what was done when those first homesteaders died out. To pass ownership between living persons, like between Elizabeth and her kids, a deed is used. To pass ownership of property from one party to another, the instrument of transfer or agreement is required to be in writing, contain words of grant, contain a full and adequate legal description, designate the parties or grantor and grantee, be properly executed by the grantor, and be recorded.
Now hold on there. Here's what it really means. It means that it has to be written down. It has to say that you're giving something to someone. It has to tell what it is that's being given and where it is and tell who you're giving it to. Then it has to be signed by the giver and taken to the county courthouse to be recorded for public record.
There are many ways property can be conveyed. Now, old Sam received possession of his 640 acres by patent. When he died, his son, Lewis, inherited all of Sam's land by final decree, which was completed in probate court and recorded with the county clerk of Adair County, Oklahoma. In the oil and gas industry, deeds are commonly used instruments of conveyance of ownership. Now, when Lewis gave land to Elizabeth, he did so by using a quit-claim deed, which grants all his interest in the property with no guarantee that he has true title or rights. When Elizabeth split up her property between Petey and Sandy, she did so by warranty deed, which guarantees protection against claims of all other persons. Now, remember when Petey's tractor kicked the bucket? Well, Petey used a mineral deed to sell part of his minerals to his sister Sandy, so he could buy one of those brand spanking new tractors and keep working the land. Now, all these deeds, or instruments of conveyance, had to be signed, sealed, and delivered. That means they had to have the instrument of conveyance, or deed, signed by the grantor in the presence of a notary public, who then affixed the seal of notary on the...
Now, what that means is the person selling the property has to have it signed in front of a notary. He puts a seal on it, they send it down to the county clerk, they record it, and that's it. Signed, sealed, and delivered.
Well, now that the ownership issues have been taken care of, Sandy, being the industrious person that she is, thinks mineral development of the property would be a good idea. So she decides to bone up on her geology. Sandy learns that much of the Earth's history can be told by rock layers. She also learns that the place where oil and gas are formed is called source rock. Source rock goes way back to dinosaur days, and over time, dinosaurs and trees and mold and stuff are changed by heat and pressure into gas and oil. So off Sandy goes, looking for geologic evidence of gas and oil. Sandy finds some rock that looks like source rock. She knows she's close because oil and gas from source rock is squeezed out and travels until it finds a more porous reservoir rock. Now, most folks tend to believe that oil is found in great big pools under the ground, but that's just not how it is. Oil's actually trapped in between individual grains of the reservoir rock. To give you a better idea, let's do a little science demonstration. Now let's imagine this bowl of sand is a layer of sandstone, a common reservoir rock. Now imagine this colored water is oil. As we pour the water into the sand, it doesn't pool, it trickles down to fill the spaces between the grains of sand. Now that's kind of how oil acts in reservoir rock. It just fills the spaces between the grains until no more oil can fit. Now, here we see Sandy using some rather interesting oil exploration methods. She's rooting around for some formations like anticlimbs, domes, faults, reefs, bars, or angular unconformities, which tend to trap migrating gas and oil. These formations, called trap rock, are often sealed by a cap rock, and Sandy thinks she's found one. So, how do exploration companies really decide which location is the best for drilling? Well, they, like Sandy, may refer to geologic maps prepared from surface observations or use core sample information. They may rely on satellite imaging, but the most recent development in gathering geologic information comes from two-dimensional and three-dimensional seismic images. Through sonic detection methods, various underground formations can be identified and located from the surface. Companies like Blue Sky Oil and Red Dirt Exploration are interested in Sandy's minerals and will be looking for sedimentary layers in the seismic records. Now, their geologists will want to locate regions that show layered seismic information. From there, they'll want to check with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and look into subsurface information logs from wells surrounding Sandy's property. You see, each well upon completion has got to be logged, and that log's got to be filed with the OCC. Sometimes well logs aren't publicly available because log information can be kept confidential for up to a year in order to protect the drilling interest owner. After all, you never know which formation might turn into a gusher. Red Dirt Exploration has collected quite a bit of information on other wells in the area and feel that they can accurately pinpoint a location that best provides chances for finding oil. They decide to explore Section 36, which includes Sandy's property. And as you might imagine, Sandy's pretty tickled about it. As it turns out, Blue Sky Oil Company is also interested in Section 36. They've already got a landman looking into records on that property, with hopes of negotiating leases with the land and mineral interest owners. Now, in order to find out who owns the mineral rights, a landman generally checks through the abstracts or county courthouse records. Sometimes the landman will rely on ownership records and field information. Nevertheless, once ownership is determined, lease negotiations will start.
I'm with the Blue Sky Oil Company.
A lease has the terms the exploration company must follow. Plus, it has what the mineral owners will receive. It grants exclusive rights to explore and drill and produce oil and gas from that particular piece of land. Now, just about all the terms of the lease are negotiable, and chances are they'll pay more if they think they can get a big hit. Or they'll probably pay a little less when they think it's a little iffy. Now, there is a standard lease form available, but even terms in that standard lease form are open to negotiation.
Okay.
Thank
Y'all
you.
take care now.
Okay.
Certain terms and clauses or provisions commonly appear in leases, and Sandy, like any mineral interest owner, needs to know what these mean. One of the first terms to be familiar with is the name of the party granting the lease. They're called the lessor, and the party receiving the lease is the lessee. Sandy needs to be sure that an effective date is included in her lease.
So my effective date is when?
Because the effective date is the date when the primary term actually begins, even if the lease is signed months in advance. Remember, you can sign anytime, but the contract won't actually begin until the effective date is reached. And what that means, of course, is that the day you sign the contract is just that, a signature date. The date you have the lease notarized is the date of acknowledgement. You see, the notary is simply saying the signer is, indeed, the person who signed the lease. Remember those other considerations I mentioned earlier? Well, those are bonus payments, usually based on acreage, delay rentals, paid when there's a drilling delay, and royalties, or a share of the production from the well. You get the bonus payment and delay rental payments during the primary term. The length of the primary term is stated in the lease. It's the amount of time the leaseholder has to get ready to drill. And if they haven't started by the time the primary term ends, well, they could lose their lease. Now, the primary term can be cut short if the leaseholder surrenders the lease or fails to properly pay delay rentals. Once drilling begins, the primary term ends.
Now that's right. Now when the drilling operations begin in the well, that's when the secondary term comes into effect and will extend the lease through the production. Now, when the production occurs, all delay rentals will cease and your royalty payments begin.
Sandy's lease needs to have a legal description of the property included in it. Now, while Sandy's got her own method of describing her land, using a legal description is, indeed, the best way. Now, there should also be a royalty clause in the lease. The royalty, or share of production Sandy will receive, is stated as a fraction, like 1/8 or maybe 1/4 or 3/16. Well, it looks like they've settled on 3/16. And there are even times when special clauses may be added to the lease. And Sandy, well, she's got a doozy.
Now I want to make sure that this well is properly logged. So I want a special clause in my lease, and I want it to read like this. In lieu of being furnished logs, leasee reserves the right to be lowered by leasee's drilling or completion unit head first down the wellbore with a flashlight powered by 2 D-cell Duracell batteries to inspect the downhole formations. The speed of such lowering and retrieval shall be at a speed sufficient for the lessor to completely analyze the potentially producing formations and shall not exceed the speed of a prudent operator. In the event that the lessor should become stuck, leasee shall immediately commence fishing operations for the lessor's ankles, and under no circumstances should the leasee plug and abandon the well without lessor's permission, which shall not be unreasonably withheld.
Finally, the lease must be recorded to protect both sides. Unrecorded leases are binding on both parties and on their heirs. But not recording a lease can cause, as we say, lawsuits, family feuding, and serious squabbles. Now, both parties should make sure the lease is recorded in the proper county. Now, that, of course, would be the county where the minerals are located. Okay, so Sandy, Petey, and Lewis have successfully negotiated mineral leases. Now it's time for the drilling title opinion. Since Blue Sky Oil negotiated the most acreage for lease on this spacing unit, their attorney will do a record search of the wheat crop property, which he'll use to prepare the drilling title opinion. It'll contain sections for legal description, materials examined, ownership, encumbrances or title problems, a lease analysis, and title requirements. The attorney may use an abstract or take a look at the county courthouse records. Sometimes ownership reports or existing in-house records will be used instead of ordering a drilling title opinion. Generally, these other methods are done by a landman. Now, like the case of Sandy and Petey, since one of the mineral owners doesn't have surface ownership, a separate agreement's got to be negotiated with the surface owner before drilling on his property. Well, now that all that legal mumbo-jumbo's out of the way, I think we're ready to move a rig. But wait, there's a couple more things left to do. First, all regulatory paperwork should be filed with the proper authorities. And before drilling can start, the site has to be made ready. You know, stuff like survey, road building, clearing and leveling of the well site, and digging of mud pits. Now, Blue Sky Oil Company's got all these things taken care of, and they're ready to drill. After drilling to a set depth, the drilling rig will be dismantled and moved off location so that completion work can begin. The completion crew will perforate the formation so it'll give up its oil. They'll do some formation testing and seal off unproductive formations. Then they'll stimulate production through acidizing or fracturing and put production equipment like storage tanks, separators, and lines in place. When the well's completed, the operator, in this case Blue Sky Oil, has 30 days to file a completion report with the OCC. Well, Sandy, Petey, and Lewis have eagerly looked forward to reaching this stage. They can now begin to sell oil and gas. That is, if contracts have been made with purchasers. Now, most of the time, the well operator handles contracting of sales of oil or condensate for all the owners in the well. But for gas sales, it's a little more common for the working interest owners to arrange their own contracts. Well, Sandy, Red Dirt Exploration, and Blue Sky Oil have reached their goal. The well known as Petey Number 1 is complete and producing. Now, profits from production can be divvied up. The attorney from Blue Sky Oil will prepare a division order title opinion, which says who all the owners are, what they own, and if there are any problems in the way. Generally, that'll take about 3 to 4 months. But if there are lengthy or complex titles, it may take longer. In Oklahoma, payment must be made within 6 months, or interest on the revenue is due all owners. Now, the attorney may choose to do a stand-up opinion, where he or she literally stands and reviews the record books right there in the county clerk's office. The division order titled opinion, when done, will have separate sections for the legal description, the materials examined, and a summary of well ownership. It'll also have a separate tract or breakout of surface and mineral interests for each acreage of common ownership. Everyone with interest in the well are included in one of the tracts. Any title encumbrances and requirements will be listed too. These are generally things that have to be taken care of before interest payments can be made. Title problems, often called clouds on title, may mean that additional documentation is needed to prove an interest owner's right to receive his payments. It also includes a summary of oil and gas leases and assignments. You see, the division order title opinion is how a company protects itself by making sure the title is clear before any payments are made. Now, after all that work, if there are still title problems remaining, a company can put payments into suspension. If you have an unmarketable title, the company paying you owes you 6% interest per year while your payments are in suspension. If you have a marketable title, the company owes you 12% interest. Needless to say, companies don't like to put payments into suspension. Now, Blue Sky's Division Order Department will slice up the well's revenue pie as they calculate interests. The interest calculations must add up to the whole number 1, or 100%. Interest is always calculated as a fraction of the unit's total acreage. So, if you have 3/16 interest in 80 acres, you really have 3 divided by 16 times 80 divided by 640, or 0.02343750. On the PD number 1, a unit of 640 acres, Red Dirt Exploration holds a 13/16 interest on 240 acres.
Or 0.30468750% interest. Blue Sky Oil Company does somewhat better at 7/8 interest on their lease of Lewis's 320 acres and 13/16 interest on the lease of Petey's 80 acres, or 0.53900625% interest.
Hold on, wait just a cotton picking minute, sis. What it comes down to is that I get 1/8 royalty on my 320 acres, or 6.25% of profit. Petey, on the other hand, gets 3/16 royalty on his 80 acres, or 2.33% of profit. And Sandy has a 3/16 interest on her 240 acres of mineral interest, so she'll get a royalty based on roughly 7% of production profits.
There can also be overriding royalty interests. For instance, Blue Sky Oil owes an overriding royalty interest to Richie Rich, an independent landman who gambled his commission for an interest in what eventually became PD number 1. Well, once the calculations are done, everyone involved will get division orders. The division order shows who has interest in the well and how much each will receive from the well's production, and has a warranty of interest. They also have the name, address, and tax identification or Social Security number for each owner. The division order also requests notice of ownership changes, title disputes, and adverse claims, and sometimes includes a list of title requirements. To make things more uniform, there is a model form of division order which meets Oklahoma state requirements and has been adopted by the National Association of Division Order Analysts and approved by the National Association of Royalty Owners. Oklahoma doesn't require division orders before payments are made, but your right to receive payment is what the division order is all about. In fact, proof of identity may be asked for when there's confusion over a name. Petey Place could be Petey Place, Peter W. Place Jr., or Pete E. Place. Are they all the same person? You can bet the company making payments will want to be sure before sending out those checks. And even if you don't sign the division order, a tax identification number and or Social Security number is required for our good old buddy Uncle Sam and those darn revenuers. If Sandy, Petey, or Lewis don't provide a tax identification or Social Security number, the companies making payment are required by Uncle Sam to withhold 31% from their checks. Or, if you qualify, you can provide a copy of certification of tax exemption. If an interest owner changes his address, he needs to be sure to provide that information to the company paying him. Otherwise, how's he going to get his check? Okay, we've got Petey, Sandy, and Lewis all clear for title, their interest calculated, and division orders properly executed. Now what? Well, their information has to go to Blue Sky's Revenue Accounting Office. That's where a division of interest, which includes all the important stuff about interest ownership, name, address, Social Security, tax ID numbers, and interest decimals, is placed in the accounting system and used to make what everyone is interested in, the payments. Well, just about now, Sandy's feeling pretty cocky about her ventures into mineral development. Because of her, Uncle Lewis and her brother Petey are receiving regular royalty payments while they just keep on a-farming. But if they want to be wise mineral owners, they each need to know how to reconcile the revenue check information. At first look, revenue checks can seem overwhelming. They've got lots of information that's required by the state. But all this info tells interest owners about their mineral production. A revenue check will show lease or well identification, the month and year of sales or purchases, the total barrels or MCF purchased, the price per barrel or MCF purchased, total severance and production taxes excluding the windfall profit tax, net values of total sales after taxes, the owner's interest expressed as a sixth place decimal or more, the owner's share of the total value of sales prior to deductions, the owner's share less taxes, and an itemized listing of the amounts and purposes of other deductions. Lewis, Petey, and Sandy can use all that information and more found on the division order to help them track production on the PD number 1 and to help them keep track of their individual interests.
Operator? Could you, I was trying to get a hold of the Corporation Commission.
By making a call to the Oklahoma Corporation Commission's Consumer Services Department, they can even get information about production on their well, the spacing of wells, operator identification, the production zone, and the date of last production. They can also share their complaints about how their mineral interests are being handled if problems should arise. As Lewis, Petey, and Sandy have learned, good oil and gas management is the way to make sure your venture into oil and gas development is a successful one. By properly managing your mineral interest, you'll have the advantage of knowledge and experience on your side.